All right, and we're recording. So, like I said, welcome to the Zoom intro, and we're going to get everyone started on Zoom today. So, the big thing we want to accomplish today is setting up your Zoom account. We want to mention how students are going to get started with Zoom. We want to do an overview of the features. We want to do some demoing with Zoom, and we want to talk about best practice in terms of privacy, security, and some key features. Two important things to mention. There is going to be there are some trainings for advanced Zoom. So there's some things we're going to touch on, for instance, breakout rooms, we really only have 50 minutes a day. So we're not going to be able to cover all those great things you can do with Zoom. So this is basically meant to get you started. And with the tools you get today, you will absolutely be able to run meetings. You'll be able to interact with students. And that's the hope. The last thing I want to mention is we're going to be using an exit ticket. It's just a quick Google form, and I'll put it in the chat right at the end of our session. That's how we're going to take attendance for today. So there's no need for anyone to go to Skyward. Rita and I take attendance on our end of my learning plan, but the only way we can take attendance for you, because we have so many people on the call, is filling out that exit ticket. So that'll be really important. Our norms for today. We have a relatively short session and a lot to get covered. So we just like to remind ourselves to stay engaged. If you could use the chat to ask questions or clarify the content just around Zoom, we've got so many people in it. If it gets clouded with other kind of things, it'll get tough to manage. And then once again, we are recording this session, so the chat also gets recorded. And we always want to make sure that we're really transparent about that with staff or with students. Rita, can I pass off the ISTE standards to you, because it's a little bit of your territory?
Sure, definitely. So like any great lesson, we try to model that in our technology world. We also have standards. There are both student standards and teacher standards around the lessons. And I just wanted to point out today by you as teachers, you are definitely hitting many of the ISTE standards. And I mention this because a lot of times with educator effectiveness or some of the other evaluation formats that we go through, that it kind of like, oh yeah, that's right. I am a learner. I'm engaging in all the summer PD. I'm a leader. I'm showing my students and my colleagues best practices. You're a digital citizenship and you're designing lessons facilitating Zoom. So as an educator, you definitely are doing many of the ISTE standards. For students, you're going to be teaching students, obviously, especially in this session, digital citizenship skills. They're going to become empowered learners by using their voice in the chat and in Zoom presentations. Global collaborator. I mean, we were talking earlier, what would we have done 20 years ago if this would have happened without Zoom and things like that? So imagine the different guest speakers and others you're able to bring into your classroom via Zooms and things like that. So all sorts of neat ISTE student standards we're covering.
Thanks, Rita. And we'll come back to these standards just to mention them at the very end too, and kind of bring us full circle. So one thing I did want to mention is I know last spring we had some other tools at our disposal, whether we're teachers or administrators or support staff. So many of us were using Google Meet to meet with students. Some people are using the Canvas conference feature. This year, Zoom is going to be the district video conferencing for all courses for everything. The Canvas conference, if you used it, it's a really powerful tool. It's a paid service and it's still live right now, but it'll probably get cut off at some point. And just for the sake of consistency and continuity, we really all want to be using the same thing. So just so I say it loud and clear, Zoom is the thing. And if you could pass the word, if people are talking about Google Meets with classes, we want to be using Zoom, all of us. So what I want to do right now is we want to get your Zoom account started and mention how students will get started with that. We will pause in about 3 slides so that right now, if you just want to kind of listen along, you're welcome to jump ahead and start setting up your account or to mess with your account settings. But rest assured, if you just want to listen right now, there will be some work time built in about 3 slides.
Mm-hmm. So what, oh, go ahead, Dave.
Oh, no, you go ahead.
So what we are suggesting all staff do is sign up for, because there's Zoom Mobile, and many of you might have joined via various Zooms over the summer via your iPhone or your iPad or another device. but we are suggesting that you use the web version, and we're going to do our instruction today based on the features of the web version, which are a little more robust. So that's the procedure we're going to take you through. Dave's going to talk to you a little bit about updating your profile, and I'm going to share with you how do you schedule your first meet and how you do some synchronous learning sessions and how you invite others to your meeting.
All right, so when it's time, and like I said, you can do this now or you can do it in a couple of slides. You're just going to go to zoom.com to create your account. Once you open up zoom.com, it's going to look like this, and you are just going to sign up or sign in, and that's going to be at the top right. Just so you guys know, I really like this because I was concerned about how do I get all my students signed up for things. Students will not have to sign up any account. So teachers are going to directly invite students to a Zoom meeting, and students will accept the invite through their district managed Google account. So there's no additional login for students. We're going to post the link on Canvas or distribute it in another way. Canvas is probably going to be the way because it's the learning management for all. And then kids are just going to click into it and they should be all good to go. So that's great news, I think. We have to create an account, students do not.
Dave, just an FYI, I know at the elementary they're not using Canvas, so I'm not 100% sure if your link would be in Seesaw or if you have another like classroom calendar or something like that. But however you're providing the link, students will not need an account.
Yeah, thanks for jumping in, Rita, and reminding me of that. Yeah, that's a great point. Canvas only for secondary. So once you create the account, you can just sign up with Google. One thing is, I know if you look at the screenshot on the right-hand side, Teresa Voss was kind enough to help us out with this presentation. I'm sure she's run some trainings with Rita as well. So many of us have a personal Gmail account. So when we choose an account to associate with Zoom, we want to make sure it's our teacher account, our at Verona K-12 Wisconsin US account. So we definitely want to do that part. And then once you get in, and you don't have to worry about scheduling your first meeting yet, Rita's going to take you through that in a second, but it is best practice. There's a couple of things you can change in your profile. And so when you get into Zoom and you're logged on, your account's created, on the right-hand side, you'll see profile, meetings. We're going to go over meetings today, and we'll go over settings too, how to change some of your settings. But if you click into profile, you can change the picture that auto-populates, which will be the picture from your email. You can also change your name too, because you're oftentimes going to be communicating with students. Some people might feel more comfortable with, Mr. or Miss in place of your actual first name. So that's something that you can play with afterwards. And we are suggesting, I changed mine up. When we're thinking about making connections with students and being available for new students who don't know us, I think it's best practice. And like I said, I changed mine after the screenshot to put a picture in for Zoom of ourselves, just so kids I think kids are just curious and they like to know, and it makes us maybe a little bit more approachable. But that is definitely your call, whether you switch out, whether you switch in a personal picture or not of yourself. So let's pause here for a moment, and I'm going to jump out of screen sharing mode, and let's pause and get your Zoom account set up. Rita, how long should we take? 3 minutes, 5 minutes?
Yeah, I think 3 minutes. The one thing I would suggest is that you set up your picture after our Zoom session today. I noticed that when I went to change, I also set up an additional Zoom account with another email. And I noticed when I changed my picture, it only allows a 2 megabyte picture. And I was using a lot of pictures from my phone, which were higher quality. And so, it can take like 10 or 15 minutes if you don't have a plethora of photos available. So the profile photo, I guess I would strongly encourage you maybe just to set up after our Zoom session, because that's not essential to getting you started day one with your students or whatever day you're going to introduce Zoom. Maybe it's not day one, but maybe that could be something you set up at a later time. And I have shared the presentation in the chat. So whenever you have a minute, you might want to click on that and add it to your own Google Drive if you'd like, so that you have it for reference maybe at a later point. in case some of the material that we go over is maybe a little more in-depth than what you wanted to learn about today. So just an FYI for that. So Dave, 3 minutes, we'll go into radio silence and let them go to zoom.com. Again, zoom.com. And you definitely want to authenticate with your Verona Area School District email address.
I lost control of my screen, Rita.
Is this Sarah? I can't see who's talking.
Yeah, Sarah.
If you lost control of your screen,
I'm
I don't
looking
know.
at yours. I'm looking at yours. It says you are viewing Rita Mortenson's screen. I was in the middle of putting in my birth date.
Yeah, so what you can do is you can just hit escape out of there.
Okay.
You can hit escape in the upper left, and then you can manage your own screen.
All right, gotcha. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So Rita, I'm noticing an interesting question in the chat. There's a picture in the profile setting, but it doesn't appear when I have my camera off.
So a couple things, some of these settings might take place when you restart. So I wouldn't kind of worry too much in this session. I know this is the picture in my profile, and when I shut my camera off, you can see I'm actually logged on 2 different devices. A really good suggestion that I would have if you have access to an iPad is when you do Zoom accounts or do Zoom sessions, that you join on your iPad and you join also on your laptop. And the reason for that is you can monitor the chat. Whenever you go into full presentation mode, you lose the chat and you lose the thumbnails of people. So, so you can see my profile picture is the same as when I've closed off my camera. So I wouldn't worry about it too much now. It might even require a restart. I'll go ahead and stop share. Well, actually, I'll share this here. Okay, go ahead and give us a thumbs up in the chat or some indication that you have your account set up, possibly not your profile photo, so we're gonna move on, but you have your account set up. So I see quite a few thumbs up there. I'm looking in the chat. Everybody doing okay? All set, I see all set, done. Yes, done. Yep, same problem with the photo, so please do not worry about your photo at this point in time. That's, consider that extended learning.
All right.
Okay, Dave, I'm gonna go ahead and continue then because it looks like the majority are weighing in and saying they're all set up.
All right.
So I'm gonna show you a few essentials for your first Zoom session. So I am going to show you how to enable the waiting room. The waiting room is one of the required features that the district is asking. I'm going to show you how to monitor the chat, share your screen, mute participants, record your session, end your session, and post your recording. Woo! So we're going to go over all of that in about the next 20 or 25 minutes. So let's go ahead and get started. I will demo all of this, but I'm first going to go through the slides as talking points. So the first thing that I'm going to jump out and live demo is scheduling a meeting. I'm going to show you how you should name your meeting. If you imagine students going to 2 or 3 Zooms a day, or maybe even more if they're involved in extracurriculars like a sport or a club. So naming your Zoom is important, not just my first meeting, and possibly even putting a description. So I'm going to go over this screen here for everybody. I'm also going to talk specifically about this area. You are required to use the waiting room feature. And the waiting room feature, I did not use it on this Zoom session. And some of you might have been in other meetings throughout the summer where the host has to let you in or the doorbell rings and you can hear the doorbell. Staff should employ the waiting rooms in Zoom so no students can enter without the host letting them in. When you have waiting rooms, you will need to admit students. You can do it individually or all at once. So just an FYI on this, the reason I did not enable waiting rooms with 50 people is it's difficult to present and monitor the waiting room, especially when you're in presentation mode. So I'm assuming in your classroom routine, you're probably not going to get into presentation mode maybe within the first minute. You might welcome your students to the day. Maybe you have a warm-up activity in the chat. But when you go into presentation mode, you do lose the capability to see your participants. That's why I have an extra iPad set up. And I think that's critical because imagine the anxiety of students if they are 10 minutes late or are just finishing up picking up their younger sibling from the bus and they're 10 or 15 minutes late to your session and they can't get in. And I do appreciate that somebody in the chat asked for my cell phone number so that if they had trouble, they could respond. It's challenging as a presenter, and you know this too as a teacher, to monitor the chat, answer your phone, present, do all sorts of things. So, setting up those kind of expectations with your students is important. The video, I generally have off when students join, just in case there's something in the background that maybe they're not aware of, maybe another family member kind of walking behind them or, dishes in the kitchen or something. I would not check enable join before the host. That's kind of a moot point since you're actually imposing the waiting room, so you're letting them in. In some meetings, like in this meeting, Dave joined before me because I enabled joining before me. Let's see, breakout room pre-assign, we're not going to get to that quite yet. And the one with the blue arrow by it, record the meeting automatically on the local computer, that sounds like a really good idea. It sounds like it's a good idea to do that in case you forget. I would not suggest checking that box. I would only be very intentional about recording the new instruction. So it's going to be shared with us that whenever we're providing new instruction, we should be recording that portion of the Zoom and then posting that either in Seesaw or Learning Management. If we have a Zoom to build community, to have a review, to have an open discussion about a reading assignment we had, if it's not new instruction, you do not have to record your Zoom. You might have out of your 30-minute Zoom experience or 45 or however long your Zoom is, that maybe only 10 minutes is new instruction. I would suggest only recording those 10 minutes. We started this entire Zoom, so at the end I'm going to have a 50-minute Zoom. That's going to be too much for students to look at or watch. It's also going to be a lot for their iPad to kind of buffer and spin. So I wouldn't check this button. I'll show you the screen that you can actually begin recording when you're doing new instruction. So I'm going to escape out of here now and do a live demo and be able to answer any questions that you might have. So I have my Zoom account. I'm probably right here. I come in the next day and I'm right here and I'm like, where do I go? What do I do? You can always click on my account and it'll bring you to this page with navigation on the left-hand side. So on the left-hand side, I see my navigation. You are doing meetings. Webinars are things where webinars happen when 500 or 1,000 or 10,000 people join. Participants are not able to see each other. They're not able to utilize the chat typically. They're meant for a really large group kind of event. So you're going to pick meeting. And you can see I have a laundry list of Zooms here. And you too are going to have a nice list of all your Zooms. And so it gives me several pages. I have 22 Zooms yet before school. But this is a great way for me to kind of stay organized so I can make all my Zooms in advance, and I have the list here. But I'm going to go to schedule a new meeting. So I click on that, and I'm going to put here in my topic, I'm going to put AP Chemistry meeting on August 28th. And I might put a description for myself, because imagine if kids going back and, over the course of a quarter, you might have, I don't know, like 25 Zooms for a class. So this Zoom will cover the opening day activities for chemistry, for AP chemistry. I'm going to select the date from the date range. I'm going to make this for tomorrow. I'm going to select the time. It's going to be 1:30 in the afternoon, and Zooms are typically going to be less than an hour, so that would be fine. It's on Central Time here, so I leave that. I have done recurring meetings before, but before you dive into some of those activities, I would definitely not do that from the beginning. I would definitely do a one meeting at a time to get you and your students used to the routine. You would not have required. I checked required when I made each of you register for the class. That was the only way that we could match the My Learning Plan and this registration. Otherwise, theoretically, 100 could join at any given time. So I required registration. You're probably not going to be doing that unless you're doing a special event for an activity or a club or something like that. And then scrolling down, the video is off. Audio, you can allow them to join by telephone or computer. Several in our audience today are joining by their phone, and maybe they're just doing audio. Sometimes people that are driving in the car might put it on their Bluetooth to listen. And then enable join is not, and then I click save. So when I've done that, this is, see this link right here? This is the URL that I'm going to copy and give to students. So this is the link that I'm going to put in my Canvas LMS or on my Seesaw or wherever you envision putting it. Down the road, you might want to teach your students to be kind of savvy Zoom users. I also, for all my meetings, I also add it to my Google Calendar here. And then it goes directly to my Google Calendar so that when I want to start a Zoom, I can start it right from my calendar. So if I were to show you what my calendar looks like, anything in red is my staff PD this week, my Zooms. So if I were to click on this calendar invite, I would just click that Zoom and my Zoom as an instructor would start. Now, the only caveat about that is I have to be logged at least into my Zoom account. So usually what I do is I get in the habit of logging into my Zoom account early in the morning. And then after that, I just use the calendar as my way to kind of ground myself, because when you have a lot going on in your day too, kind of keep going back to this Zoom, can maybe get kind of time consuming. The other thing too that I often get a lot of questions at is I set this meeting for 1:30 and I just found out that for whatever reason I have to change it to 2, or I even have to change a date. You can always come into your Zoom meetings and you can always go down here to edit meeting, and you can always edit your meeting. So in case you accidentally had the wrong date, in case you had the wrong time, you can edit those. Just don't forget to hit save. So again, this is the calendar invite you're going to copy and paste and send to people. What questions do you have on that before I give you a little bit of time to set up your first Zoom? And it can be a practice Zoom. It can be a practice Zoom with another colleague. It can be a practice Zoom with a significant other or a family member.
Rita, I have a couple questions that came in the chat. Can I bring them up right now?
Sure. I think I'm seeing them too, Dave, about my options. And if it were about all the options that I have, is that what it was?
There was one a little further back, and I wonder if it's
Okay.
a problem someone else had. So I got a private chat regarding when you sign up for the Zoom account initially, there being a question about, are you signing off on behalf of the school? And I don't remember that question when I logged onto Zoom, but I know Zoom is being used so widely. I don't know if that has been added, and if people have to do that part.
So you don't have to do that part as long as you authenticate with your school Google. When I signed up for my personal, like I also wanted a private one because I'm doing a few Zooms unrelated to my school district, and I have my own personal Gmail. When I did that, it did ask me, are you doing this on behalf of your school? And I said no. because I'm ethically not, as educators working in a school, we get longer recording times, and we get other features that they're providing educators free of charge. So you shouldn't have to answer yes or no to that as long as you're using your Google.
Perfect. And then the other questions were just the ones in the chat, so they're visible to you right there. The
Okay.
audio question,
So,
and then they're about a video.
So I do have a few other features, and please don't worry about those. I had to sign up for a pro account specifically because of our high school needs. The educator version allows you to have 100 participants. And for our faculty meetings at the high school, we had at times we had 180 on. So I had to get the pro version for our school, which is like $15 a month plus additional features for different recording and different breakouts and things like that. So please don't worry about some of the other features. And somebody asked, why join without video for the host? What's the difference between hosting a meeting and scheduling? You're going to be doing scheduling a meeting, and I wouldn't worry about too many of those little radio buttons. What I found, there's a lot of features in Zoom. There's a lot of Zoom users, big corporations, big and small. So I would just kind of stick to the basics and probably not experiment early on with all the different features. Join without video is an option, because if I'm somewhere with low bandwidth, sometimes I might choose not to turn my camera on. And I've had to do that multiple times when I presented for other occasions. I presented when I was up north, or even in my car, and choosing join without video is an option. So, well, why don't we dive a little deeper then a little bit? I do want to kind of be mindful of the time. So I am watching for security. Do we need to use and share with students a passcode? No, Jenny, if you share the link, I personally think, even though it said passcode here, as long as I gave you the link, you did not have to join via passcode. I think passcodes are going to be problematic if kids have to, on their iPad, enter in a 9-digit passcode. So as long as you're sharing the link, you're going to be good. And the students should not reshare that link with others, and you shouldn't put that publicly for others to join. But again, since you have the waiting room, you're going to see who's knocking on your door, and you're going to be able to let people in. And Dave and I are going to go through why it's important that students join with their first and last name, and not like some nickname that you don't know. So these are all different norms that you're going to establish in your classroom. Okay, let's go over a couple other features then, and we'll give you a little bit more time to practice. So I see a question specifically about Seesaw. That might be something you ask your elementary principals or your CLSs. I'm not sure exactly the best practice for elementary and Seesaw. I know for the high school, we're probably going to use a lot of the Google Calendar. Even students are going to be using the Google Calendar a lot. So many of these questions we're going to have to noodle a little bit, and because Dave and I are kind of the presenters of some technical content, but each site might have some different protocols. And I'm hopeful that you have conversations during opening days as a staff about Zoom, because this is going to be a really huge beneficial tool. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and move on to a few other little things. So when I am presenting, it's very challenging. I cannot do live mode and actually show you my Zoom account. So that's just not how Zoom works. So I did have to take screenshots. So on this screenshot, and you can try this too while we go through, but you see, starting from the lower left-hand corner of your Zoom window, you should see audio and an opportunity to mute. And I see many of you are familiar with that. And you see stop video, and many of you are familiar with that with the little red line through it. So when you click on that little up caret on the video menu, you see FaceTime, choose background, and video settings. Now in our advanced session, we're going to show you how to make some fun virtual backgrounds, at least if time permits, we're going to show you. But right now I'm going to ask you to click on video settings. And when you do that, you're going to get a screen such as this. Now we're not going to have time to go over all of these features in this. Again, more in-depth things in our advanced session. But one thing we did want to make sure that everybody was aware of, under the word general, you're actually able to pick the skin tone that best reflects how you would want to be kind of received in a Zoom environment. So you can kind of ponder this. It might be something to share with your students. This feature might not be checkable when they're on their iPad, but we do know that students might have access to a family computer or something of that nature. And for sure, we wanted to make sure that our adult presenters, such as yourself, knew where you could change skin tones if that was something you wanted to do for your Zoom presentations. So the next feature I'm going to be sharing is the recording portion. So just to kind of ground us, synchronous video conferencing should be recorded if teacher is providing instruction. And I know many of you have been commenting and have been going through the Modern Teacher, and they talk a lot about asynchronous, the time that's not face-to-face or in a Zoom. But synchronous would be, if I know that today I'm presenting new Zoom content or new AP chemistry content, I need to record that. I also need to pin, and this is critical, I also need to pin my teacher view so that I do not include all the other people in the presentation. So on the next screen, I'm going to show you the little button that you use to pin. And when you pin, and these are things you really need to practice. And in our first Zoom with 50 people, it was suggested that we have everybody jump off this Zoom and actually practice this in a real Zoom and then jump back on this Zoom. That's not really theoretically possible in a 55-minute Zoom and to get everybody back into this Zoom. So you're going to have to trust the process. That's why you have the slideshows, but you're definitely going to want to practice this. And I practice all the time just by logging on to another device with a different account or even my own account. So this is what it looks like when you first start recording. This is the sequence of recording. I have to click the record button first, and you can see in the lower, on your lower tray, you should see that there are 51 participants in this call. You should see the chat, you should see share screen, and you should see record. Give me a thumbs up if you see record. Okay, I see confirmation on many that you see record. So when you hit record, there's like, I don't know, however fast you are, there's usually like a 10-second where I have to get my screen set and get into present mode. So for that split second, this is what everybody saw. They saw my entire tab bar. They saw what's on my, what tabs I had open and what things I had bookmarked. And that's very interesting and intriguing for 50 people watching me present. So when you're done recording, you can trim out the beginning and the end. But as you do your 5th Zoom and your 6th Zoom, you're probably going to be saying, I don't have time to keep trimming out this. I'm just going to, so I mention this for you to be mindful. I'm very aware what I have up when I record. I'm very aware of what tabs I have open when I record, because this is what they see for those split seconds. And not only do they see it, but it's part of your recording. So somebody could go back and pause it. I'm just being kind of really transparent with you. So this is what you're going to want to try right now. And you might not be able, you can pin it to yourself now, but you're going to want to practice when you record. If you practice just by yourself, like if you start a Zoom just by yourself and you're the only one, you will never see these features up above. You have to have more than one person in your call. So we see Teresa there in the purple, and then we see the top of Dave's head in the next picture with that ceiling fan over him. You're only going to get those 3 dots that we're showing where it says mute and then those 3 dots when you have more than one person on your call. And when you click on those 3 dots, you see where it says pin video. When you do that, no matter who is talking, the camera feature is always going to be on you. And Teresa shows you this in the bottom. Teresa, Dave, and Rita are all on this call. She's getting ready to pin. And then that's the content. So you're going to want to practice that.
And that's a great one to practice with a family member, because it takes 5 minutes. You set up a practice meeting, which is great to do. And then you pin the video and have them say something. If they don't pop up on the screen, then you know you've done it right. And it's super easy to do. I do that stuff all the time.
So there's a question, do you pin before you present? Can you only see the pin if you're the host? I don't see it. You should see this you should see when you mouse over, you probably can't be in gallery view. If you're in gallery view for this presentation, you probably should be more in the view where all the people are at the top or on the side. I even see it on the side when I'm on my second. You see the 3 dots in the upper right hand corner. You're going to find those 3 dots, ground yourself, and then say pin video. So do you pin before you present? That's going to depend on your workflow. You know, the minute you hit record, it's going to start recording. So we're doing our best. You know, I'm not going to say this is going to be like picture perfect from the beginning, but we're going to do our best. Teachers should upload and post the video in their learning management system for students to access. And you're going to upload that in K5 for Seesaw and 612 Canvas, because parents do want to see the new instruction. So we're not only posting this for students to see, but parents will have access to some of this too. Let me just talk a little bit about, again, because it's hard to demo this. Even if I would jump out and demo, you're not going to be able to see my Zoom screen with participants chat and screen share. When you hit the record button, you're only going to have one option to record. It's going to record to your desktop. You're not going to have the option to record to the cloud. I have that on my paid version, but you're not going to have that option. So it's going to record either to your downloads or your desktop, and it's going to make a folder. The very first thing you're going to see is the record file will be converted to MP4 when the meeting ends. So picture this. I start my lesson for 30 minutes. I'm welcoming students and I'm doing an engaging activity for the first 15 minutes. And now I say, students, I'm going to record. I'm going to record this session. And so I hit the record 15 minutes in. I have 7 minutes of instruction. I stop the record. So you can start and stop the record. You can't get multiple recordings in one Zoom presentation. So I can't be like, I'm going to show this first AP lesson for 2 minutes, start and stop a recording. And this next one for 2 minutes and start and stop a recording. You cannot get multiple recordings in a Zoom session. I do not get my recording until my Zoom session ends. So the minute I click that great big red leave button that I know we're all familiar with, because we all exit out of these Zooms like there's no tomorrow, right? The minute you click that red leave, this is the top screen that you'll see. It'll see the recorded file will be converted to an MP4. And then when it gets converted, it'll say converting meeting recording. You have a recording that needs to be converted before viewing. And it's probably going to take about 5 minutes. If you're recording a 1 hour Zoom, it might take about 15. So those are the 2 screens you're going to see. Again, have the presentation up and go back and practice a few of these things. What wonderings or questions do I have before we move on to some key features? And Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is your portion, and do you want me to jump out or continue driving?
Why don't you continue driving, because I'll put the form in the chat at the very end. But this
okay, perfect. Perfect. So for time, we're going to kind of continue moving on. Yes, Dustin is mentioning the option to pin video will only show up if you have your video turned on. Thank you, Dustin. So if you're not seeing that, I think that was on one of the slides Voss put. You have to be in live mode, so you have to have your camera turned on. If you don't have your video turned on, it won't let you pin. Thank you, Dustin. Moving on with a few other key Zoom features. Dave, take it away. Oops, I think I might have, oh, yep, go ahead, Dave.
No, that's perfect, Rita, thank you. So some of the features I'm mostly going to be talking about, actually exclusively, are going to be at the bottom control. And many of us have been in Zooms all spring and through the summer and are familiar with this. I think a good perspective to think about this is thinking about when you're talking to students about them, because they might not have had the same experience. So I want to just put a plug in here for, I think, explicitly teaching these things to students. So at the very bottom, oh, sorry, can you go back one, Rita? I'm sorry. At the very bottom on the left-hand side, there's the mute and there is the stop video. So I would suggest, encouraging students to mute when they get in, if you think that's appropriate, or mute when they're not talking. I think some students are going to want to know that they can do that if there's background noise in their space, or if they have to, cough or sneeze or something like that. The other thing about stopping video too, that's kind of a norm thing. for your class or your meeting, whether you think that it's a good idea for students to be able to stop videos. I will say, and we'll mention it later, for students that are having bandwidth problems, especially if there's a couple of kids on different Zooms, sometimes stopping the video and saving that bandwidth for them to be able to see what's on screen and hear what's on screen can be a really good strategy. Some students also are just not going to want their videos on, and I think it's worthwhile considering that and the wide reasons why they might not want their video on. And as you can see with our next screen, there are other ways to kind of gauge whether they're engaged, even if their video isn't on. So if you click on the chat button, you'll see all the chat that are going on. Once again, I would exclusively show students how to do this. And I also think that some students are going to be more engaged using the chat. So if you ask a question, instead of having them speak, having them put things in the chat. I've heard of some awesome strategies where you can ask a question and have everyone type their answer into the chat and then kind of give a countdown 3, 2, 1, and then they all blast them into the chat at the same time. And that sort of prevents them from influencing each other. So you can manage the video conferencing. You'll have the option to mute both audio and video of some of the participants. You'll have that back end. You know, when Rita and I present, I think she mentioned this earlier, we always sign on with an iPad and our laptop. So if we're presenting, we can still see the chat. So you can join Zooms on multiple devices.
Dave, can I mention a couple of quick things about the chat that teachers should be aware of? When you do private chats to people, like some people have been privately chatting, Dave and myself, those are not included in the video recording, at least not from my experience, not in my paid version that I tried yesterday. The chat is part of the video recording, so you do want to be very careful of that. And you want to practice these features too before you do them with your students. So maybe at the next department meeting or PLT, if somebody typically starts the Zoom meeting, maybe you say, hey, can we all rotate and have practice starting, recording, ending? So, you know, I know that's a suggestion I'm going to give at high school. I know a lot of times department chairs are the ones kind of setting the Zooms and leading them, but maybe you can have some shared ownership. And so giving people an opportunity to really be the one that creates the Zoom and does the recording and all sorts of things like that. Dave, take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Rita. And I wanted to address a couple of questions that were in the chat. The save chat also gets saved and it's a separate file. That's what happened when I did it. The private chat, like Rita said, does not save. We had a question about, can the host see the private chats? We had that question at our last meeting. To my knowledge, we can't see the private chats.
No.
If you think, oh, go ahead, Rita. Do you know something?
No, that's all I was going to say too, Dave.
If you feel like private chats are going to be some kind of an issue, or you can in your settings disable the chat feature. Mm-hmm. And then there was also a question about using the chat feature for younger elementary. I think that there might be some ways you could use it in cool ways that they wouldn't have to type out full words. You know what I mean? Like everyone type in the letter B or something. But there's also that reactions where they can do clap or thumbs up, and that might be something you could integrate with the littles that won't be so tied to their literacy level.
And Dave, one quick tip before we move on to with time. The tip would be, if you want to disable the chat, maybe you make it part of your classroom practice that you're going to be, if they have questions and wonderings, you've shared a Google Doc with them in Canvas, and that's where they should be recording stuff for the day, because then everybody can see and you can see as well. So I don't want the chat to be the big thing that kind of bogs down a lot of stuff, because we do know that the chat can be really fun for kids and can be sometimes off task. So maybe if you just had as part of your norm that we're going to put, we're going to have a note taker, we're going to put all of our wonderings in this Google Doc for the day, and then you don't even have to worry about the chat feature. Anything else here, Dave, before we move on?
No, I love that Google Doc suggestion, though. It's dead easy and takes care of a host of problems. Also at the bottom, there's a participants tab. And this is where, when you click on the participants, you can see people. And this is also where, as the host, you can mute people as well. There's also a couple of options. Renaming, you can assign a host to another person. That would definitely be a co-teacher. So that is the participants tab. And there was another question in the chat about pro version to have co-hosts.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Do you need the pro? Well, I would say when Rita and I are hosting right now, we kind of pass the host back and forth to each other. And so the question was, do you need the pro edition to have co-hosts?
No, not that I'm aware of. I know Teresa has a regular account. I mean, I think I'm one of the few in the district that is the pro, and a lot of times people are able to allow anybody to share the screen. Passing it to the host, I've seen used most when I have to leave. Like I have to leave this meeting. I started it and I have to leave it because I have another meeting starting in like 12 minutes. And so if I leave, I have to pass somebody else to be the host. But even in this meeting right here, anybody can share their screen. I've left that feature open. So pretty much the only time you have to pass the host would be if somebody wants to monitor the doorbell, the waiting room, or if you're actually going to leave the meeting permanently and you need to kind of pass it on to somebody else.
All right.
Great question.
But
So
moving on because we're running a little short on time here. So screen sharing, one thing to know is that you will be able to screen share with your students. If you set it up, they can screen share with you too. When you click on the screen sharing, it'll give you options of the screens you want to share. So if it's a Chrome tab, you have to have that tab selected, and then it'll let you share it. But it's just kind of giving you options for what you want to share.
So I'm going to jump out and demo this real quick because I do want to demo the whiteboard feature here. So sometimes, I mean, if you're like me, I sometimes have like 12 windows open and 12 things I'm working on. So I have been more mindful of, especially if I'm new at something, maybe I only want to have a couple things open so there are less choices for me. But when I jump out of here to do my live demo, I'm going to stop screen sharing real quick. And then when I click on screen sharing down below, and I click on, and you can't see this, you can't see all my windows. That's why we made the example here. But now you can see this here, and there's that quick minute where I need to get into present mode. Otherwise, people can see all my tabs. And I'm going to quick get into present mode. The other thing that's really beneficial is, and we forgot to mention this earlier, but you can turn captioning on. And that might not be perfect captioning, but I'm way more aware of how I'm pronunciating things. And we do know that sometimes text is great for all learners, not just those with hearing impairment. So that's just a feature if you're in Google Slides. That's not a feature of Zoom. So I'm in present mode of Google Slides, and down on the bottom, you get other features. So I'm going to exit out of there and I'm going to stop screen sharing because I want to show you something that we're going to actually share in our advanced session. Most of the time people go to screen sharing and they quick get into their presentation and they forget that there's this feature called the whiteboard. And you can't see all the menus that I have in the whiteboard, but I have a lot of features to draw things. So I can go ahead and draw, and I can have staff and students collaborate with this. And I had a friend that teaches for the Atlanta School District, and she had 80 people collaborating on something at once, which was kind of interesting and scary at the same time. So there's drawing, there's the eraser tools, there's all sorts of things that you can use. So if you're kind of looking for a digital whiteboard, this might be the ticket that you might want to kind of find out about. So again, the annotating things and the whiteboard are some of the more advanced things, as well as the breakout rooms. Part of the reason we chose not to show breakout rooms in this session, well, one thing, because we only had an hour to present, and I even have to talk faster to get to our last 9 slides, but we need to really have some great norms, and we really have to see how students are, you know, participating in the chats and things like that. Because once we click the button and kids go into 5 different breakout rooms, we're only one person. And unless I have somebody helping me, I might not have 3 people helping me. So, you know, you'd have to bop through each one of those breakout rooms to kind of continually monitor those and things like that. So we are going to show breakout rooms in our advance, so you can definitely join us for that. So I'm going to get into the last part of our presentation, Dave. And then while I'm doing that, because I know we have about 6 slides left to go over, rest assured we'll be done with plenty of time for you to fill out the evaluation. Some best practices with privacy. Students should not work one-on-one with students via Zoom unless they have another staff member present. So just be mindful of that. Security, we've already gone over several of those features. You inviting your students using the link, you making sure you have the waiting room enabled so that everybody just can't join your, you know, we probably have all heard about these Zoom hacks that people have kind of, you know, tried to join different rooms and learn about the various features. Students cannot invite other students to the Zoom video conference using the district iPad. They can receive invites from others. So there's nothing that's going to be able to prevent us from a student on their parents or family members or friends' computer creating their own private Zoom account and using that to invite people. There's not going to be any way we can prevent that. But, you know, just please note that I think now more than ever, I know we go over the acceptable use policy as staff members, and we're going to be asked to sign that. This is a great opportunity for you to really kind of take chunks of that AUP for students. And, you know, what better time to teach digital citizenship than this year? So just off on that. Dave mentioned this great point. If student bandwidth is limited or staff bandwidth, you might want to shut off your camera. You're still going to be able to hear and see everything. You're just not projecting your camera. Having a second device handy, we've already gone over that. As I mentioned, breakout rooms can be utilized. Teachers should be monitoring the breakout rooms throughout the session, just like you would the physical classroom. And we're going to be showing you how to set that up in the advanced session. There's one more little step in your profile that you have to go through and enable. I'm certain that if you don't want to join us for the advanced, I'm certain you can Google that and find that out on your own as well. So there's nothing preventing you from setting that up right now. There was limited of time of what we could share and still honor the 5 minutes for questions at the end and the evaluation. So we do have some advanced sessions on August 24th and the 31st. You guys are such great users that I wouldn't mind, I'm going out on a limb for my other Zoom presenters, but maybe we could even up the Zoom number from 50 to 75 to allow more people in, because I do know a couple are closed. If you think you're going to be interested in joining a Zoom advance and you're not already in one, maybe you can share in the chat if it's a good idea to open them up. And then you obviously would sign up in My Learning Plan. We can't stress that enough. So the other couple things too, there is a Chrome extension that you can add so that it goes directly into your Google Calendar. We're going to noodle a little bit more techniques for closed captioning and help you get a second screen set up as your classroom monitor. Practice with a colleague, practice, practice, practice. And then to review the ISTE standards, I hope you would agree that by you using Zoom, not only are you a learner and a leader, but you're a designer and a facilitator more so than ever before. And look at all the student standards they're going over. Dave, if you have not already done so, would you be so kind as to put the exit ticket in the chat? And I can't stress this enough. We won't have time to send people individual exit tickets and individual presentation links. When this concludes, I have another Zoom right after this. So if you're off kind of working on another project, please make sure you rejoin us and do this exit ticket. Please make sure you get the presentation link and add it to your Google Drive if you want to use it to reflect later, or if you know a friend could not get in the Zoom. But unfortunately, we will not have time to send folks individual Zooms. I noticed after my 5 PD webinars yesterday, I had close to, I'm gonna